we're just gonna keep thinking of things as we go, basically here.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about.
Yeah. Welcome to VCR, a vintage cinema rewind. We're bringing old movies to new viewers.
Yep.
Just getting even better with our intros as we go.
Yeah. I feel like we gotta I should add something, but I hadn't thought of it yet until like you had already said the thing.
Yeah, that's true. Eventually we'll have this down pat.
Yeah.
All right, this week we got a kind of a different episode here, and I'm kind of excited to try a new kind of template with you a little bit.
Yeah, it'll push our boundaries a little, and we're excited for the new Matrix coming out.
Yeah, the Matrix Resurrections.
Yeah. So we're going to be looking at the trilogy that predates this new movie and explaining that overall so that we and you viewers or listeners can have a good idea of what happened and what to pay attention to for the new movie.
Yeah, there's so much to dive into with the Matrix series that you almost need to have a bit of a primer here to kind of understand all of the kind of things going on, the theological ideas, the concepts, the characters, just everything happening. It's really good to kind of get this in before going and seeing that fourth movie, because the fourth movie is under wraps basically with the plot and the storyline, and knowing the Wachowskis, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of kind of deep ideas in this, and probably even some callbacks to the first three movies and maybe some of the wider Matrix universe as well, that it's definitely going to help with our understanding and probably our enjoyment of Resurrections as well.
Yeah, exactly. And what I'm most looking forward to is seeing the difference in the time periods, because so much time has passed since the third and the final of the original trilogy that with how everything has gone in the past like 20 years almost, so much would have changed. Like how can they what are they going to do to add on and add something new?
Yeah, that's a great point actually as well, because think about how impactful the Matrix, the first movie and the series in general was on not only sci-fi but life in general, and cinema and just everything really. That it's going to be interesting to see if they can tread new ground while also not alienating super fans.
Yeah, and doing it for the fans would be like just for the fans, it might be too much, so they really have to balance that.
Yeah.
They have to bring in new fans and show something new that hasn't been done while also respecting everything that like the legacy of the trilogy.
Yeah, like I really hope that there are new fans that come out of the fourth Matrix movie and go back and explore some of this, not only the original trilogy, but some of the add-on material here, and we'll get into that a little bit later too, because there is some interesting stuff out there. And just the amount of depth and how much is covered out in the extended media is pretty incredible. I spent basically all day today doing Matrix research on extended material.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And will this continue into a further trilogy? We'll find out with the end of this movie how they leave it off. Is it just like a one and done, or is it going to be a new trilogy? And with all the new technology since 2003 when the third came out, this could be just absolutely mind-blowing with like where they go with it.
And it could be interesting as well if they decide to tread where they ended up going in the early 2000s with kind of the extended universe. That's kind of a big thing right now, is extended universes, right?
Yeah.
And so we'll see if it follows maybe that same formula that the originals did with the games and comics and cartoons, etc. I think that there could be something there, at least with the video games, and I'll get into that a little bit later.
Overall, we are very excited to be speaking about the trilogy and looking forward very much to the new movie.
I have seen these movies so many times at this point. You could probably classify me as a Matrix superfan. I think I'm at that point, and even knowing the films as inside and out as I do, spending an entire day learning new material and all the interesting side bits kind of going on and the lore of the Matrix universe was really interesting. So, and again, I'm going to point you a little bit in some interesting directions of maybe if fellow super fans out there, if you haven't explored these areas, that I would recommend and maybe where I wouldn't recommend going.
Yeah, sounds fun.
All right, so before we kind of dive into the movies, so the plan is essentially we're going to be diving into the plots of each film. Again, this is going to be a very different format from maybe what you're used to as a listener, where we generally get into kind of the history of the film, you know, the effects, all that sort of stuff, maybe why you should be watching it. This is purely just a Matrix primer, understanding the universe, the plot, the history, all of that. And so that you can go into the fourth movie understanding what's going on.
Yeah, and it's been 20 years almost, so it's completely fair if you haven't brushed up. This would be a great way to be primed on the new movie, yeah.
Yeah, because we're exploring 3 movies here, so already we're looking at maybe 7 to 8 hours of footage. You've got the Animatrix, another hour and 40. You've got a whole library of comics, video games, posts online, etc. You're going to sink a lot more time than the 2 hours kind of exploring this with us, or less.
Yeah.
That's the target, is 2 hours or less on this one.
Well, I think we can do it.
Well, in that case, we better dive in. But before we do, just a quick where you can watch all of these movies before I forget. So again, justwatch.com is a great spot to find anything, especially if you're looking at this later. But anyway, right now, the first Matrix movie is streaming on Crave or on a Starz add-on. So basically through Crave or through Prime, you get that extra channel. Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions is streaming on Netflix. So you got to have a couple different streaming sites there. The Animatrix is not crucial viewing, in my opinion, especially not for the fourth movie. But if you do want to check it out, it's available only to rent currently, but you can rent it on any platform, essentially, that allows renting. So think Prime or Apple or whatever, basically. And then the fourth movie, Resurrections, in theaters, December 22nd.
Yeah, there you go.
And it's also actually streaming on HBO Max for a month, beginning on the same day. So if you're not feeling the whole COVID vibe stuff, you can watch it at home with that subscription. You probably have to pay for an edition. I think that's usually how it works on those kind of streaming platforms.
That's how they get you.
I mean, if you got to pay for HBO Max for a month and watch a bunch of great HBO shows, I don't see much downside in that.
Yeah, that's completely fair.
All right, let's get started. The first Matrix movie. You got some plot summary for us.
Yeah, I do. Let's go.
So I guess one thing I'll say before we kind of hop into this too is we've already done our deep dive on the original Matrix movie in the last episode. So if you really want to understand if the Matrix series is for you or not, I would say go back to the last podcast and check it out. Even the first 30 minutes of it, we really dive into who it's for, what the genres are like, what you're going to expect heading into the Matrix. And so that's a pretty good primer already on if you've never seen the Matrix movies, whether or not you're going to enjoy it and what's kind of in store for you.
Yeah, and that really, the first film really set the vibe. Like, they really cornered this one specific market of what sci-fi could be at a time when it wasn't really explored as much.
It's the same thing you could compare to superhero films. You know, the 90s had some real mixed bags in there.
Oh yeah.
Like some Batman nipples kind of mixed bags. But
There's not enough nipples anymore, especially in the Batmans.
Yeah, you're probably right. But anyway, yeah, so it's kind of a similar trajectory a little bit, and this film just introduced audiences to so many not even new concepts, but just perfected them or brought it to new viewers basically
And
in
new
the
levels.
and new levels in a way that we're trying to bring old movies to new viewers kind of thing. So.
Yeah. They really set the bar with the first one. So definitely go listen to that podcast. Watch that first Matrix.
Yeah.
And
it's all downhill from there.
Yeah. All right. The Matrix is about great leather jackets, iconic sunglasses, choices, and belief.
Yeah. Choices and belief is a great point.
Yeah, you need the leather jackets and the sunglasses in there, and the shooting scenes and the fight scenes.
Yeah.
But the choices and belief really are essential to the whole exploration that the film goes into.
That's really the crucial point of the theological aspects for sure. Like there's a lot of exploration, and each movie kind of dives into and explores like one kind of main idea, and choice is really important in the second film, which we're going to get into as well a little bit. So, but still important in the first film, but belief is almost the crucial idea in the first film.
Yeah, I would say they go hand in hand. You kind of have to choose to believe, but that's part of where we go with this discussion, and that's where the movies are kind of going. So I'll start off now with a plot summary of the first and why choices are so important.
Yeah, sounds good.
So in the first Matrix movie, we are introduced to Neo, who during his regular life is Thomas Anderson. He's a office jockey at work, but at night he's Neo the hacker. He is on a quest for knowledge in the sphere of hacking, where he finds out that there's something called the Matrix, and he's trying to find Morpheus and Trinity, who are seemingly the two key leaders of the search for knowledge in this area. They reach out to him, and
Neo is kind of set on this path of discovery and learning maybe a little bit about the Matrix. He just gets enough like to kind of stay interested in kind of what's happening.
It's like he's getting breadcrumbs
Yeah.
from what he's hacking online. He's like in this like dark web kind of area where they're looking for the truth because something seems off. And so Trinity and Morpheus eventually reach out to him because he's gained enough knowledge that he kind of knows there's something going on.
Yeah, he's gained enough knowledge that basically he's put a target on his back essentially.
Yeah. And that target is them trying to save him, or whatever the Matrix is trying to like shut him down.
Yeah, basically. So that's when we get introduced to the agents a little bit. And there's kind of a back and forth between whether or not Neo listens to these random hackers online or whether he lets the agents take him in for questioning, essentially.
Yeah, and from that, he actually gets to meet Morpheus, who's this mythological figure within the hacking sphere.
Yeah.
And he tells him the truth, and he can take the red pill and be shown the truth in like the most extreme level, or he can take the blue pill and go back to his regular life as an office jockey. Neo takes the red pill, and because he's on this quest for knowledge, and the movie really gets into the action and the philosophical side, where he's shown that he's living in a simulation, and so is everybody else.
Yeah.
And the simulation is run by an AI program that humans created centuries before them.
Essentially, there's like an AI basically that humans created to benefit their own lives, but they pushed AI to its limit, essentially enslaving the AI race basically.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where the AI pushed back, and that set off a chain of events which led to the human beings having a last ditch effort to blacken the sky basically to try to stop the solar energy and shut down all of the machines. And the machines came back with an equally insane measure
Yeah.
of enslaving the entire human race and making them into batteries, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. They harvest like fields of humans. They harvest their bioelectricity and to run their own programs.
Yeah.
So there was this battle that took place, and the AI won. And now all of humanity is living within this simulated reality, which is the Matrix, where the large majority of people do not know they're in the Matrix. Neo finds out after taking the red pill. Morpheus introduces him to that, and from there he learns that he is the one.
Or potentially the one
Yes,
to start
yeah.
with.
So that's where the choices and belief really come in. The first film really explores the understanding of what it means to
Believe in oneself, essentially. Like, if we go back a little bit when the agents are kind of after Neo, Neo is presented the choice of doing something extraordinary or accepting that he's been caught by the agents, and he can't bring himself to do the extraordinary. And throughout the film, we see that Neo might not be the one because he doesn't believe in himself, and he doesn't necessarily believe that he can be extraordinary, essentially.
Yeah, and I don't know if we mentioned yet, the agents are a program within the Matrix that is seeking out these anomalies like Neo, who now knows the truth, and destroying them. Agent Smith, he's the main agent, and he is just such a perfect character.
Yeah, Hugo Weaving, we said this before in the last episode, but Hugo Weaving nailed it with his Agent Smith role. Like, it's one of the most memorable roles in my opinion, all of cinema. It's one of the greatest villains of all time. I bet you on an all-time villain list, he probably ranks in the top 10.
Yeah, definitely way up there.
So they're essentially set in the Matrix to essentially protect the Matrix and not allow widespread deferment from the Matrix, basically. They're trying to keep as many people asleep to the idea of what's actually happening as possible. And part of that process is seeking out anyone who's left the Matrix or people who potentially might be leaving the Matrix and terminating them, essentially. They're the Terminators of the Matrix universe.
Yeah, basically. And that's very apt.
Yeah.
Like, that's like his methodologies and his speech and everything is very robotic and very just so well done.
And at this point as well, there is enough human beings that have left the Matrix. They have formed a city called the City of Zion. And that's kind of the other secondary motivation of the agents as well, is to basically extract the security codes from somebody from Zion who's entered the Matrix for whatever reason, so that they can basically hack into the city and kill all of the humans in there, because they don't serve any purpose to the machines at this point. And if anything, have a negative impact on the machines living.
Yeah, and that kind of goes into like the technological aspect of AI, where if a program is given a certain task, how far will it go, and like will they be so stuck on the like their programming that they will do anything to complete it, which is within like the AI problems that we actually see it discussed in the real world, where we're actually worried about an AI doing what Agent Smith is doing, basically.
Yeah. So I think at this point it's probably a good idea to kind of quickly set up our main characters here. We've kind of talked about them a little bit already. We've got Neo, Thomas Anderson, who's kind of our main character, who may or may not be the one. We've got Trinity, who's kind of helped pull Neo out, and at this point is kind of his shipmate, almost essentially, because they have like a ship out in the real world, basically, that navigates through the tunnels of the
old world where the humans used to live and the machines took over.
Yeah, and the ship's called the Nebuchadnezzar. So Morpheus is the captain of the Nebuchadnezzar, and he's very rooted in his beliefs, and he's very sure of himself in his beliefs. He believes that he will find the one who will end the war between humans and machines. We've got Agent Smith, who is the main agent and has the most screen time with the agents there. All right, we've got Cypher, who is another person on the ship, basically. But Cypher's motivations are a little bit more sinister than the rest. He isn't as enthused about the idea of living in the dark dystopian world of the real world, where the Matrix is really a utopia, basically, compared to that type of living.
Yeah, it's modeled after 1999, the peak of human civilization.
The peak of human civilization.
Yeah.
And lastly, we have the Oracle. And the Oracle is this all-knowing being within the Matrix that provides prophecies and guidance to the people of Zion to help their efforts in the war and push them forward to finding the one and ending this war.
She's not necessarily all-knowing, but she can see certain things that the computers, the AI, can't see. The machines don't understand humans and the way humans interact, whereas the Oracle can see and understand what humans' motivations might cause them to do and where that might lead them.
Yeah, I mean, we can, I think, get into as far as we want, basically, because this is the primer, right? So the Oracle is a program created and designed by the machines, and the main purpose of the Oracle originally was to be an investigator of human behavior, to essentially understand the human race, basically. And if you think about it, think about a supercomputer today that knows the ins and outs of how to play chess, essentially. So the computer learns all of the different moves and processes in chess to the point where it can beat even the most experienced chess humans in the world. So the Oracle is kind of a similar in that sense, where the Oracle's prime directive is understanding the human race. So the way I kind of see the Oracle is somebody who can see the human race and understand all of the processes going on in the human mind to be able to calculate different probabilities of certain things happening. And because the Oracle understands what those probabilities are, can see the next steps in the chain. So she's almost kind of playing everyone 10 steps ahead of everything going on, because she's got that processing power to essentially understand, okay, well, if this choice is made, then this is going to happen, which probably results in this. But if this doesn't, and probably has just a million things going on, but as things go, like it's like a decision tree that's constantly moving, essentially.
So the way I see it is that they say it in the movie that she sets you on a path. On that path, you are going to face certain decisions. And so she's basically a program that says, if you do this, you should go down this path because that's what you want and that's what you're asking of me.
Yeah.
And so if you go down this path, you will face certain decisions. And based on what she understands of humanity, that path is the correct path to find what you're looking for at that time that you ask her.
And the Oracle is also very cautious to tell people things before they're ready to, basically. Yeah. And that's kind of the first time that Neo goes to see her, because that's kind of a step in the process of becoming the one. And Morpheus believes very heavily in the Oracle and the prophecies that the Oracle gives to people. So when Neo goes to see the Oracle, because he himself isn't ready to believe that he is the one at that point in time, that the Oracle doesn't tell him he's the one, essentially goes along with Neo's idea that he is not the one.
But she gives him a choice.
And this is something that she kind of harps on a little bit more in the second movie, that often the choice has already been made by the time you're considering your options. Basically, it's interpreting why you made the choice or why it matters, basically, from there, kind of thing.
And it really puts emphasis on the fact that choice is very human.
Right.
Like it's essential to, like, if she was human, she would probably just tell the whoever asks her, like, she would tell them the answer. But because she understands what humans are like, she's like, you have to make that choice.
Like I said, the Oracle also gives out prophecies. So there are kind of three main prophecies that we learn about throughout the first movie. The first is that Morpheus was to be the one who would discover the One.
Yeah.
The second was that Trinity would eventually fall in love with the One. And the third was that Neo might not be the One. However, there would come a time when he has to choose between his own life and Morpheus's. At this point in time, if we want to kind of tie this a little bit more to the plot, we've gotten to the point where Morpheus has taken Neo to go see the Oracle because Morpheus values the input of the Oracle so much. He needs to know whether this is the one, whether he's finally found it. Because we kind of get hints that Morpheus has taken out people in the past thinking that they could be the one, and it hasn't worked out that way.
I don't know how heavily he believes Neo is the one, but it's quite strong at this point. But anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I found here the quote that I wanted to kind of bring up about the prophecy. The big overarching prophecy, essentially. There was a man born inside the Matrix who had the ability to change whatever he wanted to remake the Matrix as he saw fit. And this was when the first Matrix was built. And after he died, the Oracle prophesied his return and that his coming would hail the destruction of the Matrix, the end of the war, and bring freedom to the people of Zion. So we kind of get all this. It's a little heavy-handed. There's a lot going on here. And from here, kind of on the side, we've got Cypher also kind of brokering some deals with the Smiths and the agents to kind of jack him back into the Matrix. He wants to forget about the whole idea of the real world and just go back to living his ignorant life in bliss. The way that you get jacked into the Matrix and come out of the Matrix is essentially through cell phones. You have to kind of connect to... not cell phones.
This is 1999.
This is 1999, the peak of human civilization.
Yeah.
They basically
phone booths.
Landlines essentially.
Yeah.
So you have to essentially connect to the Matrix, almost like a dial-up kind of thing. So on the way out, after they visited the Oracle, is when basically Cypher betrays the group.
Yeah.
And there's kind of the scene where he's basically gotten out of the Matrix first, and then at that point in time, all of the agents have pinpointed the location of the crew of the Nebuchadnezzar within the Matrix world. He's killed the crew of the Nebuchadnezzar who wasn't jacked into the Matrix. And then he starts one by one kind of unplugging each of the crew of the Nebuchadnezzar, which basically breaks the connection between your mind and your body, which kills you.
Yeah.
So...
Because when you go into the Matrix and your body is outside and you're jacked in, your mind living in the Matrix, that is kind of your life essence or whatever you want to call it. So if that gets disconnected, if you die in the Matrix when your body is outside of it, you die in real life.
Yeah, it's severing connection between your mind and your body, essentially.
Yeah.
So just before he pulls the plug on Neo, was it Dozer or Tank? One of the two, just in the nick of time, saves Neo's life and kills Cypher right there. At this point in time as well, we've got Morpheus, who's been captured by agents, and Trinity and Neo are kind of on their own a little bit, but they survive. They get back to the real world on the Nebuchadnezzar. This is the point in time where Neo has to make that choice: his own life or Morpheus's.
Yeah,
Because
the choice that the Oracle set him on the path
yeah,
to eventually make.
yeah, yeah, because at this point in time, to save Morpheus is essentially a suicide mission, because they're heading into prime agent territory. We've already been told at this point that the agents are essentially unkillable machines that no human has ever killed before.
They're just way faster, way stronger, yeah.
Yeah, just everything. They seem to be impossible to touch, basically.
And Neo, at this point, has basically been told that he's probably not the one, and that this suicide mission is basically to save Morpheus or to save himself. But Morpheus, the Oracle kind of put emphasis on the fact that Morpheus is so important because he believes so much, and he is supposed to find the one.
Yeah.
So, Neo decides overall to go on this suicide mission.
Throughout the journey of saving Morpheus, he begins to believe in himself, essentially, and believe in his own abilities, basically, and he begins to push the limits of his abilities as well. It's not, I can't do this, like we see Thomas Anderson in the first 20 minutes of the movie. It's, I'm going to try and see what happens, basically.
And I believe that this is worth it, so I'm going to do it.
Yes.
And then that leads him to finally realize that, shit, he might be the one.
Yeah, exactly. So we save Morpheus.
This is where Neo really comes into his own. He starts believing, and he believes in the choices. He understands that those choices that he made led him to this point. And the belief and the choices kind of converge into his understanding of what the Matrix is, what it's like to be a human in the Matrix, and what it's like to be the one. And, or at least, at this point he knows he's the one, because he just, as soon as he did the Matrix, in air quotes, he, like, Trinity looks at him and she says, I've never seen anyone move as fast as you just did. That's like as fast as the agents move.
Yeah.
And then from there, he has an amazing fight sequence with Agent Smith.
Yeah.
Where I believe that's where he actually, like, breaks the agent's his sunglasses, and, like, they have an amazing fight scene in the train station. And then that carries over because Trinity gets out, and it's just Neo and Agent Smith back in there.
So we've completed the rescue mission. We're on our way out of the Matrix to get out of there once and for all, because the heat is on. All of the agents are in pursuit. So we've got the telephone scene in the subway where Morpheus leaves, and then Trinity goes to the phone, and at that exact moment, an agent shows up and basically shoots the phone so that Neo can't leave. And then this is where we get basically the face-off, the big face-off between Smith and Neo.
So they have the fight scene in the train station, and then they have another fight scene later. Like, it carries over to another building.
The other agents, he's basically he's trying to escape, and there's more and more agents kind of piling in and trying to stop him. And this leads to his death. He gets shot. He dies.
Yeah, he gets shot. And that's it.
And that's it. The end of the movies. There's no more.
Yeah.
And then that's where we get Trinity's kind of love scene, which we talked about not necessarily loving in the other podcast, where Trinity says, you can't die because I am in love with you, and the prophecy is that I'd fall in love with the one, basically.
Yeah.
So she kisses him out in the real world, which causes his heart to start again, and he gets back up, and he kills Agent Smith right then and there.
And it's over.
And it's over.
No, he has this major, again, fight scene as soon as he wakes up, where he fully, like,
he's fully
the one.
Yeah, he stops bullets from, like, even hitting him. Like, he stops them in their path, basically, by freezing them in the air.
Yeah, like, his previous fight scene, he was 99.99%, like, Lysol or something like that.
Yep.
But then Yeah, as soon as he wakes up, he's 100%, and he jacks into the Matrix, and he can see the green code,
Yeah.
and understands all, and then just destroys Agent Smith there.
And this is where essentially he's reborn basically as the One, which kind of a little bit starts to fulfill the prophecy. So we're almost done with the first movie here. There's a few clarifying things that I want to bring up. The first being a little bit how the agents operate within the Matrix and how that kind of impacts the death of Smith and why that's relevant. First of all, there seems to be kind of a set number of agents, and there's always only one of each agent, essentially.
They're unique.
They're unique, yeah. And so the way that agents move around, because, these agents need to be wherever they need to be very quickly as things change within the Matrix and maybe outsiders are jacked into the Matrix, etc., is they basically assimilate with regular human beings living within the Matrix.
They jack into whoever that person's body is within the Matrix. They take over these other people's bodies.
Yeah, essentially, in order to get to where they need to be very quickly. So part of the reason why it's so hard to kill an agent, and why no one's ever done it before as well, is when you kill an agent, you're not actually killing the agent. You're just killing the host of the body that the agent has taken over. And we see that when Trinity kills the agent on the roof during the Morpheus breakout scene.
Battle, yeah.
Yeah. When she shoots the agent, it's not the agent who falls down and dies. It's actually the pilot to the helicopter on top of the roof who the agent kind of jacked into his body, essentially. So, and why this is relevant is because at the end, we see Neo, instead of trying to shoot the agents, he actually jumps right into Smith. Like, he literally jumps into his chest and kind of inserts himself into his body, basically.
He inserts his code.
Yeah.
His genetic code.
Yeah, he inserts his code, basically, and just explodes Agent Smith all over the place, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that is a very final way to kill an agent. Or so we think.
Yeah, and it's somewhat erotic based on Blake's description.
You can read into that however you want, I guess, as a viewer. Is there any other kind of big pieces that we want to talk about? Actually, there's one quote that I want to bring up really quickly from the first one. And I've never caught this before. I mean, I've heard the quote, but I never caught the meaning of it until I was doing my hardcore research today. The scene with the Oracle and Neo's trying to decipher whether or not he's the One.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, okay, are you going to ask the question? Or like, what do you think? And he's like, I'm not the One. And she goes, sorry, kid, maybe in the next life. And then he dies and comes back.
Yeah.
And actually, I don't want to dive too deep into theories here. I want to do that a little bit later and stay into, like, here's what we know and maybe what we don't know. But I do want to quickly touch on this a little bit. We often see the Oracle baking cookies.
Yeah.
And actually, in the second movie, as we're going to talk about, food can be a way to transfer data. And so there is maybe something there to the Oracle's cookies where she might have given Neo something that would regenerate him upon death or something like that.
That's a pretty hardcore theory.
Yeah, or even maybe something to maybe make him the One or something like that.
Honestly, that's something that I think a computer program like the Oracle might understand about humans, is how important food is to us as a civilization, as a species or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty cool little theory, because we do see food called back in different various ways later.
Yeah, it's important to the characters, and it's important to different plot points as well.
Yeah.
In a way that it wouldn't be in a lot of other films.
Yeah. For example, within the first film, the importance of tasting that steak for Cypher. He's like, oh, I know this isn't a real steak, but damn, does it taste good.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good explanation of the original Matrix. If we have any other stuff that we think of as we get through the next films. We'll bring it up too, but
Yeah.
so let's get into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
The Matrix Reloaded. So this film, it opens with Neo having a dream about Trinity being killed by an agent, essentially. And this is kind of haunting his dreams. And at this point in time, we're about 6 months from the events of the first film. So Neo's kind of come into his own. They've visited Zion. And that's where humanity is essentially holed up to eventually maybe wage some war against the machines or rescue everyone outside of the Matrix, essentially.
Yeah, like they're currently surviving there and they're planning to thrive through whatever means are necessary.
Yeah, and we're talking like deep underground, basically. I think at one point they say near the core of the earth where it's still warm, essentially.
Yeah, they're living basically in the like sewer systems and the maintenance channels of this old technologically advanced world that died, where the humans and machines kind of were living together, and they just burrowed very deep into the earth to build all of the things that were running their society up until the war. Right. So they're living like deep underground. The only place that's left available to them that's far enough away from the machines.
Yeah, so in the opening scenes, we get a meeting of the captains. So all of the different captains of the ships kind of out about doing different levels of surveillance, essentially. We kind of hear a bit of a discussion back and forth about how their orders are to all return to Zion, because one of the captains has received word from a separate ship that there are about 250,000 sentinels approaching Zion from the top of the earth, which is effectively a machine for every human being living on Zion. So we're talking about a genocide, essentially, coming to take place in Zion.
Yeah, and these sentinels are like squid-like flying creatures that are not creatures, they're machines, and they're just extremely fast and brutal.
So they're like the perfect combat machines that have been created by the machine world to hunt any human that's ever kind of gotten out of the Matrix, essentially, and effectively take down these ships that are traversing the underworld and kind of doing those reconnaissance missions or jacking into the Matrix. That's something important to note, is that the machines can pinpoint the location of the people in the real world based on where they're connected through in the Matrix. So it's basically strictly forbidden to have that connection within Zion, because you would bring the whole machine army down on Zion that way. So we essentially also have to have those connections outside of Zion in order
in the ships.
Yeah, in the ships, in order to basically try to stay one step ahead of the machines.
Yeah.
So we've got this meeting, and this is kind of when Smith appears in a silhouette, and his voice is unmistakable, and he drops off the headpiece, and he says to the man who's kind of at the door staying security on this major meeting that he's got this message to Neo that he's finally being set free, kind of thing. Oh, that's what I was going to talk about, the first movie. God damn it.
Let's go.
All right, we're going back to the first movie really quick, because this is something that's actually really important, because while they've captured Morpheus, there's a whole torture process involved here. And as we mentioned, the agent's kind of secondary purpose is to find the keys to Zion in order to basically unlock the path to Zion and go and kill the humans. So this is where we get the back and forth here. We get Agent Smith, who has his one-on-one with Morpheus.
And his monologue.
And his epic monologue where he basically just puts out his hatred for the human race, basically, out on the table, and talks about how he hates being kind of trapped in this world of having to live amongst the humans, essentially, and how he wants to be free of his primary purpose currently and live like separate from these humans, these vile,
Yeah.
disgusting, stinky human beings,
And
basically.
that's really where they delve, I think, most deep in the first movie into the idea of this AI that is very adaptable. So Agent Smith and his program were programmed to search out these humans, but over his experience and every little interaction he had with humans, he just hated them more and more.
Yeah.
So he was learning as he was going.
So this is kind of really important because we saw Smith die in the first film, and B, he's come back and he's thanking Neo for being set free. So this is a very sinister opening to the film. We get, after this, the agents kind of lock in on the meeting. Everybody has to leave and get in their ships and kind of get away kind of thing. But they leave one ship kind of out floating around in the real world, while all the other ships go back to Zion based on orders. They were all supposed to head back to kind of defend the city.
But Morpheus was like, no, we have to keep one ship to help Neo.
Morpheus believes that the Oracle is going to give them some further information on how to end the war, essentially. So we get back to Zion, which is this massive mechanical city. It's protected by these huge metal gates and mechs and turrets, the whole gambit, basically. It looks like an unpenetrable fortress, essentially, in the middle of the earth.
Yeah, like they're deep underground in these like dome cities that are like carved out with so many mechanical things that they've repurposed for their needs. Yeah.
And so I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about Zion later, because it's not quite important to the whole plot points here, but it is something important to kind of understand about the city itself a little bit later. Kind of our next step in the film here is more dreams by Neo, and at this point, you know, we haven't seen any of his dreams come to fruition necessarily, but we see him dreaming about a crew member aboard the other ship out in the world, and one of the crew members named Bane is converted. He's kind of pinned down by Smith, and kind of almost in the same way that Neo kind of hops into Smith, Smith kind of puts his hand into the body of Bane and converts him into another Smith agent as a clone, kind of separate from what we've seen the agents able to do in the past.
Yeah, so previously we had only been able to see agents that hop into another body.
Yeah, and so at this point in time, it's kind of a question of, did this person, because after we see Bane take the phone, the Smith Bane, and leave the Matrix, and that's when Neo wakes up. So, again, we don't necessarily know if this is true or not at this point, and if it's even possible for someone who doesn't exist in the real world to be able to hijack another person and get out of the Matrix. Kind of, we're back in Zion, and this is where Neo gets sent a message from the Oracle that he needs to come right away to see her, essentially.
But they have a rave first, right?
Yeah, we don't need to talk about that at all. Not important at all to the
But the
story.
rave, man.
No, the rave.
Okay, let's move on.
So he goes to find the Oracle, and instead he finds a man named Seraph who challenges Neo to fight him, and he must match Seraph in battle to essentially gain access to the Oracle. He has to make him believe, essentially, that he's the one. So we see this fight, and they match combat, basically, and he's able to gain backdoor access to the Matrix. So we learn that Seraph is a program, and he's protecting the Oracle. He's kind of like a firewall, is what you could think of it as.
So if we were to look into it deeper, which I have a little bit, Seraph is a term for an angel in biblical senses, which there are themes which we talked about in the first podcast about this.
Yep.
So there are Christianity parallel themes within the Matrix. So Seraph is kind of like a head angel that is like right below like archangels or potentially a god figure.
Yeah.
So within the film, it makes sense that he is the protector before the Oracle.
Yeah, and that's actually referenced here and there throughout the film. It's kind of little tidbits that you get. And I love the little tidbits in the films that kind of add to the overall story if you're paying attention. And they're not necessarily they're not necessarily important to the plot, but they enhance the story. They enhance the world, and that there is callbacks to that, especially with the Merovingian that we'll get to later.
Yeah.
So basically, he provides this backdoor access to the Matrix, which takes them directly through a series of doors in the background. Think like a back hallway at a stadium, something like that. And we go and see the Oracle. And this is where we confirm that the Oracle is a program developed by the machines.
Yeah.
And this is, again, where the conversation of choice really becomes kind of heavy-handed here, where the Oracle says to Neo that you're not here to make a choice, you're here to understand the choices that you've already made. And this is where the second movie is, again, very much about the power of choice, and even whether we have any choice or not.
Yeah, like free will is kind of like partially talked about. It's not exactly, they're not hitting you over the head with it.
Right.
But the concept of choices and the paths that you take to those choices is very central.
Very central. Yes. So this is kind of where we get our first mention of what's considered the path of the one. And the path of the one is essentially how the one will end the war. And where the war ends is at what's called the source. And that's where basically the head of the Matrix, where the Matrix and the machine world kind of all coalesce as one, kind of join there, and all of the main things kind of running is out of there. So the Oracle says to Neo that he needs to basically get to the source, and the way he's going to get to the source, with the help of a program named the Keymaker, who has special access to the source through the Matrix. The problem is, though, right now, is the Keymaker's not so easy to access. He's being held against his will by the Merovingian, who's this kind of other program who's gone rogue. He's kind of doing his own thing, separate from what the machines are doing, and he's living large. He's kind of the big bad gangster boss in the Matrix world. And if Neo can convince the Merovingian to give him access to the Keymaker, then he can end the war by going to the source, is what the Oracle tells him.
Yeah, and basically the Merovingian is like the mob boss of like the underworld of the Matrix. And so he's very comfortable, this guy.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to do anything for anybody unless it's going to serve his purposes. So why would he help anyone else?
Yeah, for sure.
So it's quite a challenge that he has to overcome, obviously.
Yeah, this isn't an easy challenge. So at this point in time, this is where Seraph tells the Oracle, hey, we gotta go right now. Something's about to happen. And so the Oracle says, all right, I'll see you later. And so the Oracle and Seraph head back through the door to go back into the back end of the Matrix and get away. And Smith shows up. And
of course.
And then Smith shows up. And then Smith shows up.
And then more Smith.
And then about 40 other Smiths shows up.
Yeah.
And we get this epic fight scene between Neo and all the Smiths.
That was super cool.
It was good. It is starting to show its age a little bit in 2021.
You know what?
The CGI, they really reached for the limits of CGI
at that time.
2000s.
Yeah. It wasn't that much of a stretch from the first movie, and if you were watching it at that time, it was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And watching it now, there's a little bit of not lagginess to it, but it's still very good.
Yeah, it's great. I have a lot of fun with the fight scene that happens. Again, I'm gonna poke a little bit of theory into this one, that because there's all these Smiths in here and they're not part of the Matrix, that the reason why things start to look a little weird is because the Matrix is rendering, essentially.
Exactly, yeah. And you really do have to think about a lot of what's going on in sort of computer terms, because they are in a simulation.
Yeah. And Agent Smith has been freed from his initial purpose of hunting down Zion operatives, essentially, or people who are considering leaving the Matrix, or those glitches, those anomalies in the Matrix. He now wants to destroy the Matrix itself.
Yeah, yeah.
So he's kind of replicating and doing his own thing outside of what the machine's intentions are.
He's realizing his glorious purpose.
Yes.
Or something like that. I don't know if I did the voice right, but like, goddamn his voice, man.
Yeah. Mr. Anderson.
Ah, that was a good one. That was a good one.
I've been saying that for like 10 years. So.
Yeah.
So at this point, Smith tries to convert Neo. Neo kind of is able to stop him from taking over Neo's body and ending the whole series right there. And we get this fight. Neo eventually just ends up flying away because there's no way he's going to beat 40 Smiths. There's just no way.
And there's more than 40, I feel like.
Oh, there's like 100 by then, yeah.
Because it starts with one Smith, and then he brings in, he like sees another person, he brings them in, and then he just keeps bringing in new Smiths that he's transforming everybody that is in the area into more Smiths. And it's just, and they're like piling on.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Because we keep getting more. Like there'll be like the fight and there'll be like 12 of them there. And we're fighting 12. Yeah. And then one will look at the other and he'll be like, we'll need more. And then suddenly like doors will open. Yeah. And there'll be like dozens like fleeing in and everything. Yeah. It's a fun fight scene. It's a fun fight scene. And
what Neo like grabs the bar. Like the
steel
bar,
and he's just awesome. Like, and then he's spinning around like kicking them all and everything. Yeah. So Neo gets away, and then we kind of go back to Zion, where the council is getting anxious and waiting to hear from Neo because got an army coming towards us. We've got Neo out there trying to come up with a way to stop the war.
And the council is they're basically humans who are trying to remove their human emotions and think logically because that's their enemy. They're thinking about how these machines are thinking.
Well, there's opposing thoughts even, and I want to get into this a little bit later. I want to get into some of the mentalities and everything over there. Yeah, so they come to a consensus then at this point to send 2 ships to determine the whereabouts of Neo and kind of get an update on what's going on. So at this point, we kind of head back to the Matrix, and we go see the Merovingian, who's a program who, again, he's kind of this head mob boss guy. He's decided French is his favorite identity, yes. So he's converted himself into a Frenchman, essentially. And we get into kind of a really good discussion about the idea of choice versus obedience, or causality, basically. And the Merovingian's outlook on humanity and life and everything is very different than the Oracle's. He believes that everything happens for a reason, and even if we don't understand what that reason is, there is a reason and a logic behind everything that happens. It's all about the cause and the effect, basically.
And he's very excited by that fact.
Yes, he's very excited about that fact. And that's kind of where we see he uses food as programming to kind of maybe hijack people's emotions or change individual humans' programming, essentially. So he goes and he commits infidelity against his wife, and on the way out says, I ain't helping any of you. Nobody's getting access to the keymaker, and everybody can suck it, basically.
Yeah.
And so...
Cool character.
Great character. I love the Merovingian. Yeah. And he's returning for the 4th movie. I think there's a very high chance that he's going to be the main villain in the 4th movie.
It makes sense, but... once you go farther into the theories and everything about like what he represents,
yes,
and compared to what we already know Neo to represent, and the One, so yeah, him returning makes complete sense.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite characters who's introduced in the 2nd and 3rd movies. I really enjoyed the Merovingian, and his kind of, he just is so smug. He's just a great character. Yeah. So the Merovingian chooses not to help Neo, and instead goes and commits some infidelity casually in front of his wife.
Well, of course.
His wife, in an act of vengeance against the Merovingian, decides to assist Neo, Trinity, and Morpheus by taking them to the Keymaker at the Merovingian's mansion. And so the way they do this is through a special key that she has that can open a door from one location to another. Very similar to how Seraph kind of can move between areas within the Matrix. They get the key maker, everything's great, until it's not. The Merovingian shows up at home.
Of course.
Because they've kind of sent word to him. His other bodyguards have sent word to him. So he shows up with a dozen different bodyguards.
Does he not have these two main guys?
Yeah, the twins are there
the
too.
The twins, of course.
The twins are there too.
And just as another aside, his wife is named Persephone.
Yeah.
Which is, again, historically,
That's a Greek god, right?
Yeah, she's the daughter of Zeus and Demeter, and she became queen of the underworld after her abduction by Hades, which, theory-wise, makes sense. We'll continue into this fight scene because it's absolutely amazing.
Yes. So, yeah, that a very perfect way to describe the Merovingian's wife there. Absolutely. So, the Merovingian, he drops a very relevant line as they're leaving, and he says, "Your predecessors had so much more respect when I saw them last," which is our first hint that maybe things aren't all what they seem.
Yeah.
So we get a really crazy, awesome mansion fight. There's all sorts of weapons involved. Basically, Neo takes on all the different guards all at once, who are basically ex-agents for simplicity's sake. And he allows Trinity, Morpheus, and the Keymaker to get away.
Them getting away leads to one of the greatest chase scenes and action scenes of moving vehicles of all time.
Oh, the greatest top 5 greatest car scenes.
Yeah.
Maybe a little overlong, but...
come on.
It could be a little overlong. However, it is amazing. It's bombastic. There's explosions. There's cars smashing into cars.
And they were really flipping these cars.
Yeah.
They were all the
yeah.
practical effects were on point.
Yeah. Oh,
it wasn't all CGI.
It was not all CGI.
It was all very real.
Oh yeah, and we've got people jumping from transport truck to transport truck, jumping off of transport trucks
over bridges. I feel
motorcycles, over bridges, under bridges. Oh yeah, there's one of the greatest car scenes of all time. Not at all relevant to the Matrix 4, probably, but if you want to watch it, it's probably on YouTube.
Yeah, watch that scene. But honestly, that kind of stuff gives essence to the Matrix, and it will be relevant to a certain degree.
Yeah. What there is one thing that I really want to talk about the car scene, is for the first time, we actually see that there's a lot of opposing sides within the Matrix. Because not only do we have the Zion operatives, our trio here of Trinity, Morpheus, and Neo, we have the Merovingian, the Merovingian's bodyguards, essentially. We've got, or his henchmen. We've got the agents, and we've got Agent Smith. So we've got 4 different groups here, all vying to either kill another group, take the Keymaker. There's a lot of opposing ideas going on.
Power structures going on here. It's complicated. The vying for power. Yeah.
There's a lot happening. So you're right. This car chase is pretty crucial, and this is kind of where we get the best of the twins as well. The twins chasing is really epic. They're such a good enemy. They're fantastic.
The way they phased in and out of
they're ghosts.
They phased in and out of the reality of the current situation.
Yeah.
Through walls or whatever.
Yep.
And so they could did one of them not just they saw a car coming behind them and they just hopped in the driver's seat?
So there's at one point one of the twins is able to get in the car where Trinity, Morpheus, and the Keymaker are trying to escape. And so we get this fight scene between Morpheus in the front seat and the twin in the back, which is kind of a callback to real life with your parents driving you somewhere in the car.
That's completely fair. Yeah.
And so just as Morpheus is about to get the upper hand, he basically forces the twin to have to kind of go into ghost mode, phase out, and so he flies back, and then the other twin kind of comes up and he phases back inside of the other car, essentially.
Yeah.
So there are rules to this too, right? Like
Yeah.
you can't just, you're not Supermaning it like Neo is, and that's actually a direct reference. So somebody calls Neo Supermaning. So, but anyway, we get away. It's a close, but we do get away. So the Nebuchadnezzar group kind of regroups with the other two ships that have gone to look for them. And at this point, the Keymaker kind of explains what they need to do to get Neo to the source. And essentially, each crew is kind of given a task to go and do within the Matrix to basically allow accessibility to the source via the Keymaker. And basically what the main group has to do of Morpheus, Neo, and the Keymaker is get to a location where the Keymaker can essentially open a door that accesses the source. At this point in time, where each crew, again, has different kind of objectives to play here and are off doing their own thing. As well, Neo asks Trinity not to enter the Matrix, because this is where Neo's thinking this is where she's going to die.
Because the dream from the very first sequence,
because
he's
the dream
expecting
from the very first
it.
sequence. Yeah. So this is where he says, "You please do not enter the Matrix, because I'm really worried about you."
And that again, it very much reiterates the choices, the impact of choices. So he's basically saying, like, please do not do this, and in the same way that people were telling him previously, like, don't go on the suicide mission. And it's like, oh, but the choice.
Yeah, exactly. So we get this scene where everybody's racing against time in order to unlock all of the keys to get to the source, to the door that the Keymaker is going to open. And one crew succeeds, but the other crew is tragically killed by Sentinels in the real world. So they're not even aware of what's going on out in the real world, but a group of Sentinels have found their ship and kill them all. And so Trinity, you can view the Matrix while you're in the real world. You can view it on the screens, basically. And so she sees... Through the code. Yeah, through the code. You're essentially reading code. And Trinity sees this, sees that they failed, and thinks, I have to go into the Matrix because I'm the only one who can enter. I'm the only one that knows what's happening. I have to get in there to basically keep the plan in motion.
And she knows how badass she is.
Yeah.
Like, goddamn.
So Neo, Matrix, and the Keymaker head to the location of the door to the source, and they're again ambushed by agents and Smith. There's all this different power struggles going on, and we eventually get to where the door is. The Keymaker opens the door to the source, and then he's shot dead by the Smiths and closes the door so that Neo and Morpheus are alone to get to the source. And the Keymaker says, Morpheus, take this door. It'll lead you out of the Matrix and back to the real world. Neo, take the door. You're meant to go to the source to end the war, basically.
Yeah. Oh.
Both of them go through their doors. Neo enters and comes face to face with Colonel Sanders.
Yeah, Colonel Sanders.
It was KFC the whole time.
It was Yep.
No, it's actually the architect who looks like Colonel Sanders. And there was a lot of jokes in the other 2000s about that.
Oh yeah, that's hilarious.
You don't remember that?
No. I was 7 or 8 at the time. True. No, I was 10 probably. No.
Some really great comedy comes out of this scene.
Yeah.
There's some really great comedy in there.
And honestly, I very much understand what you're talking about because he was not menacing.
No, he wasn't.
No.
He was cold and calculating.
But
more.
he did a good job.
So the architect, we walk into a room, there's a bunch of TV screens everywhere, and we meet the architect, who is the creator of the Matrix. And we find out a lot of information here. This is where the doors of the Matrix are blown wide open, essentially.
Yeah.
So we find out that Neo is actually the 6th iteration of the One. We're not dealing with the first rebellion of humans from this human race. This is the 6th. And this is the 6th version of the Matrix. And not a single other human being, except for maybe one, knows about this. We learn that the key fault in the Matrix, the reason why there's been this ongoing power struggle, is the concept of human choice. And that 1% of humans reject the Matrix, and it actually used to be much higher before the creation of the Oracle. They're what's known as the anomalies. And so again, the Oracle was created to be an investigator of human behavior, a direct kind of connection to all of this process and all of these past iterations and why the Matrix is still operating the way it is. So it's a little bit, she has a little bit of a sinister role here. So once the anomalies reach a critical mass and the Matrix begins to become unstable, the machines basically select a random human being to give a special code to, essentially making that person the sum of all the anomalies within the Matrix, all of the problems, all of the issues, to be used to reboot the Matrix and stabilize it again. So Neo has been put on this path of the One, which the architects actually calls the prime program, to guide the One to the source, essentially, to basically reset and continue this process so that the machines can stay dominant. Basically, like, you can think of Neo as like a physical representation of this unbalancement within the Matrix. So again, call back, did Neo always have this, or was it implanted in him? Which, and it kind of sounds like it does. Did the Oracle implant him with a cookie? We'll never know.
Yeah.
Interesting questions.
And obviously this was like it was a feature, not a bug of the program. Because
the bug itself is the anomalies within the Matrix. The feature is the prime program, which basically reboots the Matrix in order to consistently like reset and fix all of the issues within the Matrix caused by human choice and humans who just can't accept the reality of the Matrix. The architect is essentially using the prophecy as a form of control to force Neo to reload the Matrix. So he gives him a non-option. He says either accept that this is your purpose and come with me to the source where we're going to reboot the Matrix. We're going to kill every human being in Zion because we can't have that happening and they don't serve any purpose to us. And then what you're going to do is choose 23 individuals from inside the Matrix, and you're going to pull them out of the Matrix and rebuild Zion. And when you die, the Oracle is going to prophesize your return. And nobody has to know about the first 5 iterations of this, just as long as the human beings kind of keep going and we keep giving this freedom of choice to leave the Matrix. And if you don't want to do that, if you want to maybe go and save Trinity because we know you're worried about her, well, we'll kill off everybody. We're going to exterminate the human race. And Neo asks, but I thought we were a power source to you. And the machine says, we're willing to do other alternatives at this point, kind of thing. And so this is a non-choice, right? And so this is kind of a very interesting concept because even the creation of the idea of the One as a messiah and pushing him towards that and putting this complex within him is all a control motivator to connect him to humanity, like, deeply, and then force him to sacrifice himself for the Matrix and all of humanity. It's really sinister. It's kind of almost like a play on the Bible a little bit there.
It is. And when you think far enough into it, you're thinking that, like, the Oracle, obviously, just as Smith has grown as a program, at certain points, you want to think that the Oracle was working for the machines.
Yes.
And she must have explained to, or like transmitted the information to the machines that humans do this thing where they have a messiah.
Yeah.
So they run that in as a self-defense mechanism program where they're like, okay, if we give them this thing, they'll just keep doing that.
Yeah.
And they need that for some reason.
And you're completely right, because beforehand, the Matrix has failed 6 times before, and every time, and especially the first time, we'll get into that later, but without the Oracle, like, we're talking mass failure all at once kind of thing. Like, the machines just don't fully connect to humanity yet. Like, they even with the AI, they just don't fully understand why.
Yeah, like the very first, or at least one of the first iterations of the Matrix was a utopia.
Yes.
Not 1999 peak of humanity, where I feel like in 1999 there was garbage everywhere, but everyone had like the beginnings of what might become a cell phone.
Yeah.
And
the Nokias, which we talked about in the last podcast.
Yeah, Nokias, and like the idea of like it was like a Patrick Bateman type of society or something like that.
Yeah. So
this utopia didn't work, so then they set up this more struggle-like program because people weren't. So there's been variations of this where they've had to learn humanity over time. So yeah,
exactly. So at this point, Neo's given this non-choice of save humanity or save Trinity, and everybody else dies, and you two probably do too eventually anyway. Neo knows for a fact that Trinity will die. He doesn't know if this is actually, the rest of this is actually all true. So he decides, rather than reloading the Matrix, he chooses Trinity. He chooses love, basically. And even then, Neo's actually too late to save Trinity. She's already been shot in the heart. But he pulls the bullet out of her, and then she still dies. And then, after which, he's able to reach into her heart and pump it back to life through the power of the One, essentially, being able to manipulate the Matrix. And they're able to both leave the Matrix in peace.
Yeah.
We are then immediately attacked by Sentinels, who destroy the Nebuchadnezzar. And then we see Neo dispatch with his mind outside of the Matrix for the first time all of the Sentinels coming to kill them, which has the effect, basically using the Force, which has the effect of putting him into a coma.
Yeah.
To wrap that up, the crew are picked up by a separate ship and learn that the remaining ships in Zion were sent to destroy the Sentinels before they could reach Zion. But these ships were all destroyed after someone prematurely activated an EMP.
Yeah.
And the only survivor to all of these ships is one man, and that man is Bane.
Bane.
Who might be Smith.
Yeah.
And they're both in a coma, and that's how we end with the movie, is the slow pan of Neo in a coma on a bed to Bane right beside him and also in a coma.
Oh, and man.
What a cliffhanger.
Yeah. And honestly, if you're thinking of this from the time of its release, the second movie, it was pretty crazy. Like, the first one set the bar.
Yeah.
And this one probably at least got close to the same bar. It stayed close to the same level. People were still excited.
This isn't the best of the four films that we're going to talk about, but it's a close second. I really enjoyed The Matrix Reloaded. It's a really good time.
The quality did not drop that much.
No, it was
if
just,
at all.
Yeah, it was just
more of the same.
Yeah, it just was more of the same essentially.
Yeah.
But it was
continued.
It's great. I love the second movie.
I very much enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But
I will say that in terms of understanding the Matrix, the One, the War, the universe of the Matrix, this is the movie you need to watch, basically. Like, if you want to understand what's going on, and I've explained it as best I can, but it can get convoluted. But this is the film that really explains everything. And this is actually, at the end here, I was going to kind of dive into a little bit about what we learned about Zion and the Matrix. Not crucial to the plot, but maybe something that you may need to know for later for the fourth movie. So
we'll see, because we don't know the fourth movie yet, but we're very excited for it, and these things might help.
Yeah. So what we learned from Zion on the second movie is that we see these opposing thoughts and ideas within Zion. So believing in prophecy versus believing in the real, like the military, the physical, the practical. Yeah. And there's a lot of back and forth between what should be the primary motivator of humanity.
And they're battling the idea of they're fighting the machine. So some of them are trying very hard to think like the machine. And then the opposite of that is people who are going full on human, where they're like, we have to separate everything that is machine so that we can go full human, so that like when we go deep into what it means to be human, that's our salvation. While the other people are saying if we're going to fight machine, we have to think like machine.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So we also get some backstory on Zion. So we see the engineering department. We understand that machines are still keeping the city running. So some of the more technical things in there with the water recycler, just to understand that Zion basically is run by machines as well.
And raves.
And raves. We also see the common people see Neo as a messiah.
Yes.
So there's often crowded hallways and people asking for blessings from Neo. He doesn't get a whole lot of downtime there.
Yeah, he doesn't show up. He hasn't been in Zion very often. Mm-hmm. I think when we see him go there, it's probably like his second or third time.
Yeah, I would say. Yeah.
And like people know about him, and the poor and wretched of the society that is able to survive here is leaving blessings at his door.
Yep.
While he's going and getting laid.
Yeah.
But those two things are important.
Yes.
To a degree.
All right. So, other stuff we learned. Let's move into what we learned about the Matrix. So, everything is programmed, including the birds, the winds, etc. We learned about the rogue program. So, in the past, we had ghosts and vampires who were maybe the agents instead of the agents, the men in black that we have now, essentially. And these were in past iterations of the Matrix, and that's kind of what's imprinted on the human mind still, what we think about when we think about ghosts. And what these rogue programs have done is essentially hid inside the Matrix rather than facing deletion because they're obsolete now. Mm-hmm. And the Merovingians, henchmen, are actually past iteration of these agents. So obviously the twins we've talked about as ghosts. Yeah. There's also some other guards within his mansion who the Merovingian's wife dispatches with silver bullets and specifically says silver bullets. So we're led to believe that these are essentially werewolves.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, so
I didn't catch that. Yeah, that's a cool little point.
Yeah, no, it's actually very important, and there's other in kind of a lot of the supplementary material with the video games and the comics and stuff. There's a lot more. It goes into a lot more detail about those. There's actually different warring factions between vampires and werewolves within the Matrix. So
yeah, within programs and viruses and things like that, there are vampire attacks. Yeah. So I don't know much about if there are werewolf type attacks, but there are vampire attacks that leech onto things within programming. So when you're looking at this whole universe of coding, like it's all code.
Yep.
So that makes complete sense. I have a question, and I'm not sure if now is the time to ask.
Throw it at me.
So where did the Merovingian come from? Do you know?
We don't know, and I've got a theory for that later.
Okay. Do I mention what I think?
Let's talk about theories later.
Okay.
What we do know is that the Merovingian is very old, from a very, very old, like one of the first iterations of the Matrix. And he's been living outside of the control of the machines for a very long time. And that's where he's acquired all this power and all of his kind of henchmen, these rogue programs. Yeah. And all of this influence essentially within the Matrix.
Yeah. Okay.
And the Merovingian hates the Oracle. Just the principle of the Oracle, essentially, that some other powerful being could be within the Matrix, and that this powerful...
And that they know, like, a step ahead of what's going on, at least with the humans.
And that's one of the Merovingian's primary motives, is to eliminate the Oracle that he can pretty much grab hold of all the power that he can within the Matrix. He's plateaued a little bit at this point. Yeah. But
and like you can almost see that he's bored but also complacent within his life, like the way he's eating, and he's always eating. Yep. Which goes back into the food thing.
Yep.
Oh, great character.
I love the Merovingian. I'm very excited to see what they do with him in the fourth film.
The new iteration.
Yeah, the new iteration. Yeah. The only other thing I was going to bring up here was the first Matrix. Again, what you said, designed as a utopia, but almost all of humanity just completely rejected the idea of this program, and that's where the Oracle kind of was created in order to understand humanity and what humanity required in order to accept the concept of the Matrix and continue on as a battery source, basically. Yeah. And the architect at this point also realizes that he basically needs an imperfect design of the Matrix, just like the imperfection of humanity and the failures of humanity, he calls it.
Yeah.
That's all I got for the second movie. So there's a lot to chew on in that. That's probably the most plot heavy movie of the three, I would say.
Yeah, really.
Before we wrap up The Matrix Reloaded, there is one other character that we do have to quickly mention.
And it's Indy!
It's Indy, my dog!
Oh, she actually came down for the first time to say hello.
Yeah.
She's not too scared of me.
What are you doing? Oh, hi.
Hey, can you say something for us? No? Okay, she's gone. Yeah.
Okay, let's get back into it. So, one character that we do have to mention really quickly, because he's probably going to be relevant in the future, is the kid. So the kid is a freed mind, a red pill mind living in Zion, who was freed by Neo, essentially. We don't know how that happened. Neo kind of defers that and says, you freed yourself, it wasn't me, kind of thing. But this kid's kind of a fanatic. He believes wholeheartedly in Neo. This kid is like so infatuated with the idea of Neo and wants to help Neo in any way possible, including basically trying to get on the Nebuchadnezzar or
as a crew member.
As a crew member.
When we are first introduced to him, he's probably like 14, 15.
He was 16.
No, he was 16 in the third movie. So
this third movie happens right after.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So he's 15, 16, and he like rushes to like pick up whatever Neo is carrying or something like that. He's like very servant-like almost in his fanaticism almost, and he just worships him.
Absolutely, and so it's just important to know that this is where this character originated from, and again, he firmly believes in Neo and everything Neo stands for, and basically was also assisted in some way in leaving the Matrix with Neo. So that's it. Let's wrap up the second movie. We got to move into the third because we're working through a lot of time here. This is going to make me cry with how much editing I have to do.
Yeah, for sure.